It wasn't just the smell of old carpet and burnt coffee lingering in the hallway that made Ava Green feel like she was running out of time. It was the silence that followed her wherever she went. Silence in the mailbox. Silence on her phone. Silence when she stared at the ceiling at night, praying to a God she wasn't even sure was listening anymore. She had been living in that worn-down apartment in the outskirts of Atlanta for 6 months, ever since her mother passed and left her with nothing but a suitcase full of unpaid bills and a smile that still haunted her dreams. The neighbors barely knew her name. The job interviews led nowhere. The city moved fast around her, but she remained still, invisible. Then the message came. Not a phone call. Not a letter. But a text. Ava, this is Charles Grayson. I was told you might be available for a live-in housekeeper position. The salary is generous. The work is discreet. Would you be interested in coming in for an interview? It didn't feel real. Charles Grayson was a name you didn't say without adjusting your posture. Billionaire. Real estate mogul. Known for his coldness, his parties, and the tabloid rumors about women who entered his home and never spoke of it again. Ava stared at the message for an hour before answering. Yes. When? She stood outside the Grayson estate 2 days later, her palms damp with sweat. The gates alone were taller than the building she used to clean on Peachtree Street. The gravel beneath her cheap shoes crunched with every unsure step. She had brought her resume, though she doubted it mattered. This wasn't about qualifications. It was about something else. She didn't know what. The butler who opened the door, Thomas, was kind in a way that didn't match the intimidating luxury around him. His smile was soft. His eyes knew things. He walked her through marble floors and past chandeliers worth more than her entire neighborhood. The house was quiet, too quiet. No music. No laughter. No signs of life. Until Charles entered. He wasn't how she imagined. Not older, but timeless. Polished. Calculated. His suit fit like a second skin, and when he looked at her, it wasn't with desire, it was with strategy. Like she was a piece on a chessboard he had already planned 10 moves ahead. You look exactly as she described, he said, offering no context. Ava didn't ask who. She just nodded, trying not to let her voice tremble. Thank you for seeing me. He didn't answer that either. He simply turned and walked. She followed. The interview was short. No formalities. No deep questions. He told her the job came with room, board, and a weekly cash salary far beyond anything she'd ever imagined. She would not be permitted in the West Wing. Her phone would be kept at the front desk. She would be expected to follow orders, no questions, no deviations. You will be trusted, Ava, he said, standing with his back to the window, the sunlight casting long shadows across the floor. But trust here is a delicate thing. It's given quickly, and taken even quicker. I understand. But she didn't. Not yet. She moved in the next morning. The room they gave her was stunning. Large windows, white walls, a view of the garden that looked like a painting. She tried not to be seduced by it. Something in her bones told her that beauty in a place like this was a kind of weapon. A way to make you forget what mattered. A way to soften the sound of your own instincts screaming that something was wrong. Days passed, and the work was simple. Dishes. Sheets. Polishing furniture that didn't need polishing. Cleaning rooms that hadn't been used in years. Still, she saw no other guests. No parties. No noise. Only Charles. And only at night. He would appear suddenly, like he had been watching her through the walls. Sometimes he would ask questions about her past, questions that felt too specific. He never touched her. Never crossed the line. But his presence lingered even after he left the room. Like he had left a part of himself there, hidden in the air. You remind me of someone, he said one evening as she dusted the shelves of the east parlor. She had your eyes. Your way of being quiet, even when the room wanted noise. Was she your daughter? He looked at her then, really looked. No. She was my lesson. She didn't ask what that meant. The silence that followed the sentence was enough to make her skin crawl. On the fourth night, Ava was asked to deliver tea to the West Wing. Thomas looked pale when he handed her the tray. "He asked specifically for you," he said, like it was a warning disguised as politeness. She walked slowly, the hallway stretching longer than it should have. Every step felt like it was moving her away from the world she knew. The air got colder, the walls narrower, and when she finally reached the door, she paused, not because she was afraid, but because something in her told her this was a door that, once opened, could never be closed again. She knocked. A woman answered. Not a maid. Not a guest. Someone Ava had never seen before. Her eyes were glassy, her hair perfectly combed. She looked like a memory wearing skin. Like she belonged in a portrait, not real life. "You're the new girl," the woman said, her voice soft, almost broken. "He chose you because you look like her." Like who? But the woman didn't answer. She just stepped aside and let her in. The room was a replica. Ava had seen photos before, online, in articles, in interviews, of Charles Grayson's wife, Elise. The elegant, tragic figure who had vanished mysteriously 3 years ago. No funeral. No body. Just stories. And this room was hers. The same color. The same perfume. The same wedding photo on the nightstand. Ava turned slowly, the tray trembling in her hands. "You're not here to clean," the woman said behind her. "You're here to remind him." Of what? But she already knew. And the door shut quietly behind her. That night, Ava didn't sleep. Something about the way Charles looked at her changed. Softer. Hungrier. Not in a romantic way, in a nostalgic way. As if he was waiting for her to become someone she wasn't. As if he had written a script and was just waiting for her to memorize the lines. And for the first time since arriving, Ava realized she wasn't just in a house. She was inside a story. But it wasn't hers. Not yet. Ava woke before the sun, though it wasn't sleep that ended her rest, it was something colder, tighter, more precise. It was the feeling of being watched by a presence that didn't need eyes, like the house itself had begun to breathe beneath her. She sat up in bed, heart pounding against her ribs, and stared into the dark corners of the room, half expecting Elise to appear from them. But it wasn't Elise that haunted her. It was the question, what if I was never hired to clean? The day moved like wet smoke. Her routine remained the same, but her perception didn't. Every object felt curated. Every instruction, from how to fold the linens to where to serve tea, felt like a cue in a performance she hadn't agreed to star in. Even her clothes were replaced with softer fabrics, muted colors, and subtle fragrances that clung to her wrists like invisible handcuffs. And Charles. He was watching more openly now. Not in a lecherous way, not with hunger or obsession, but with mourning. Like Ava was a grave he kept revisiting, hoping it would answer him back. "You hold the teacup like her," he said that afternoon, casually, as she poured chamomile into his porcelain set. Left hand under, right hand firm on the handle. She used to say it made her feel more grounded. Ava didn't respond. Every word felt like a test. He chuckled softly, the sound brittle. "You don't know how unsettling it is, do you? To see someone who looks like a ghost, but breathes." "I didn't mean to look like her." "I know," he replied, gaze drifting to the fireplace. "That's what makes it even more dangerous." Later that evening, she found herself back in the West Wing. Not by invitation, by instinct. Something in her chest pulled her there, like a thread tied to the truth, unraveling faster with each step. She passed rooms that hadn't been opened in years, their doorknobs cold, untouched. Portraits stared at her with vacant eyes. The mansion wasn't silent anymore, it whispered now, in creaks and drafts and memories that weren't hers. She reached the mirrored room at the end of the hall. The same one from the night before. It was unlocked. The walls were lined with mirrors. Dozens of them. Tall, antique, spotless. but each reflected something slightly different. Her face, a little older in one, sadder in another. In one mirror, her hair appeared longer. In another, she was smiling, though she wasn't. She stepped forward, reaching out to the closest glass, heart racing. The closer she got, the more she realized, this room wasn't about vanity. It was about illusion. Behind her, a soft voice spoke. He brought you here to fix what broke. She turned quickly. It was the same woman. Pale, polished, empty-eyed. Elise? Ava asked, barely recognizing her own voice. The woman tilted her head. There is no Elise anymore. Only the version he wants to remember. Ava backed away slowly. Her pulse thundered. But the woman didn't move. She just looked tired. You don't have to play the role, she whispered. But if you don't, he'll find another. You mean, there were others? 3 before you. One tried to run. One tried to love him. One tried to burn the house down. The woman's eyes flicked toward the mirror nearest them. None of them made it past the 7th night. And you? The woman's lips quivered. I stayed. Ava didn't remember walking back to her room. Her body carried her, but her mind was spinning in 1,000 directions. What kind of man creates a world just to keep a woman alive inside it? What kind of loneliness makes cruelty feel like love? That night, sleep didn't come. She stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like constellations. Somewhere in the distance, she heard a piano. Faint, hesitant, and then suddenly full, like someone was pouring their sorrow into the keys. And when morning arrived, so did the first of many letters. Placed on her pillow. No name. No signature. Just a single sentence. Don't let him rewrite you. Days blurred. Each morning, a new letter. Each night, a new haunting. She saw glimpses of the woman in mirrors, caught whispers in vents, and found locked drawers with photographs of herself that she never remembered posing for. In every image, she looked more like Elise. More lost. More controlled. And Charles. He began changing too. He no longer asked about her past. He started telling her hers. You loved the gardenias, he said, walking with her by the glass corridor. You said they reminded you of your childhood in Savannah. You used to hum when you watered them. Ava froze. I grew up in Kentucky. He paused. Smiled softly. Not anymore. The gaslighting was delicate, almost loving. He offered her dresses Elise once wore. Asked her to try Elise's perfume. Played Elise's favorite songs at dinner, watching her face for recognition she didn't give. And yet, something inside her began to fracture. Not because she believed him, but because part of her wanted to. Part of her wanted to forget the hunger, the rejection, the loneliness. To fall into the fantasy, to let the mirrors choose who she would become. Because who was she outside of survival? And what if being Elise meant being saved? But the letters kept coming. You were not born to decorate someone else's memory. He's not in love. He's in grief. Grief will make a god of you and bury your soul beneath worship. Each sentence cracked the illusion. Each word reminded her, this isn't your story, yet he's trying to write it with your face. On the 6th night, she saw it. The painting. Tucked behind a false wall in the west wing. A portrait, unfinished. Ava, in Elise's wedding gown. Ava, with tears painted into her eyes. Ava, frozen in someone else's goodbye. She stumbled back, breath caught in her throat. And that's when she heard his voice. You're almost perfect now. She turned. Charles stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes glassy. But his face didn't carry desire. It carried resolution. Like he had made peace with a decision. And she wasn't sure if that meant the painting would be finished. Or if she would. Ava couldn't remember how long she stood frozen before that painting. Seconds or centuries, it didn't matter. Something inside her had snapped the moment she saw it. Not fear. Not even panic. It was recognition. He wasn't obsessed with Elise. He was rebuilding her. Brushstroke by brushstroke. Flesh by borrowed flesh. And Ava, without consent, had been chosen as the final layer of paint. She stepped back, her breath shallow, her fingers trembling as they clutched the side of a dusty dresser to stay upright. Charles didn't move. He just watched her like she was slipping away, and maybe in his mind, she was. Not Ava Green, the girl from the south side of Louisville who had lost everything and came here for a job. But Elise Grayson. The wife who had vanished without explanation. The ghost he refused to bury. He took a slow step forward. "I know it must feel overwhelming," he said, as if he were calming a child. "But let me explain what you don't understand yet." No, her voice came out raw, too fast, too loud for the silence of the room. "You don't get to explain. Not after this." He tilted his head, curious, calm. "After what?" "After building a world designed to trap me inside someone else's death." His eyes darkened. "Death?" he whispered, like the word offended him. Who said anything about death? That was when it hit her. He never admitted Elise had died. Because in his world, she hadn't. She was just missing. Incomplete. And Ava was supposed to be the missing piece. That night, she packed. Not in a hurry. Not with fear. With precision. Intention. She folded her clothes like she was reclaiming her body, one cotton layer at a time. Each item into the suitcase felt like a stitch back into her own skin. Her heart beat so loudly she thought the walls might echo it back to her. But when she opened her door, Thomas was there. Blocking the hallway. He didn't speak at first. Just looked at her suitcase, then at her. "You can't leave yet." She didn't blink. "You knew." He lowered his eyes. "Everyone here knows. They just choose which version of reality hurts less. I don't care who Elise was. I'm not her. And I'm not staying." Thomas stepped aside, but not before saying, quietly, "Then you better run before he realizes what tonight is." "What do you mean?" He looked at her, his face carved with pity. Tonight would have been their anniversary. Ava didn't wait. She moved fast, her body trembling with the weight of everything unspoken. The hallways twisted in her memory like a bad dream. Every shadow looked alive. The mirrors mocked her. She thought about the woman, the one who claimed to have stayed. Was she still here? Watching from the walls? Or had she become part of the house, a cautionary tale wrapped in silence? She made it to the front door. Unlocked. Her fingers reached for the handle. But then, "Ava!" His voice. Behind her. Not angry. Not loud. Almost tender. She turned slowly. Charles stood barefoot, wearing the same black dress shirt he wore in the wedding photo that now hung by the West Wing staircase. "I don't want to hurt you," he said. "I just want to finish what was started." "Started by who?" she snapped, chest heaving. "Because I sure as hell never agreed to this." His jaw tensed. "You think this was a mistake?" She laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "No, Charles. I think this was a ritual. And I'm the offering." He stepped closer. "I loved her more than life," he whispered. "And life took her from me. So now, I'm building a place where she can live again. Not in memory. Not in grief. But in you." "And what happens to me in the process?" she asked, tears rising, voice cracking. "Do I disappear? Do I forget my name? Or do you just erase me one lie at a time?" He looked away then. Just for a second. And that was enough. Ava ran. Out the door. Into the cold night. The gravel bit at her feet. The wind pulled at her clothes. The gates loomed in the distance. Too far, too closed, but she didn't care. Every step forward was a rebellion. Every breath was hers again. Behind her, the mansion didn't shout. It watched. Like it knew she wouldn't make it. And then, Headlights. From the side road. A car approaching. She waved her arms, desperate, wild. The car slowed. Stopped. The window rolled down. It was a woman. Late 50s. Sharp eyes. Worn hands. "You all right, girl?" she asked. Ava stepped forward, voice barely holding. "Please. I need to leave this place." The woman looked past her, toward the mansion. "You one of the housekeepers?" Ava hesitated, then nodded. "I was." The woman exhaled hard. "You lasted longer than most." And without another word, she opened the door. In the car, Ava didn't look back. She was afraid if she did, the house would still be watching, or worse, waving goodbye with Elise's hands. They drove in silence for miles. The woman didn't ask questions. Maybe she didn't need to. Maybe she'd heard it all before. Maybe there were other girls, just like Ava, who sat in that seat, holding stories too fragile to say out loud. Only when they crossed the city line did Ava finally speak. "Why do people still work there?" The woman kept her eyes on the road. "Because poverty feels more real than danger. And because some people would rather be someone else than be no one at all." Ava looked out the window. She didn't want to be someone else. She just wanted to be free. The letters stopped, of course. She never found out who had written them. Maybe the woman in the mirrors. Maybe Elise. In some way, Ava would never understand. She never went to the police. What would she say? That a billionaire tried to replace his dead wife with her soul? That she had been hired not to clean, but to resurrect? Some stories don't get reported. They get buried deep. But sometimes, in the middle of the night, when the city is too quiet and the lights flicker just right, Ava thinks about the painting. The unfinished face. The dress. The eyes that were almost hers. And she wonders, did he find someone else? Or was she the last one who could still run? The sky above New York didn't weigh the same as it did in Georgia, but Ava still felt that invisible pressure on her chest every time she looked up. It had been over a month since she left the mansion, and though the city roared with motion, noise, and promise, she lived in silence. She found work at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn. Long shifts. Fair pay. No one asked too many questions, and that was enough. She needed to vanish into the blur of strangers. To become invisible again. No one here looked at her the way Charles Grayson had. No one tried to shape her into someone else. And yet, something inside her was still bleeding. Freedom was real. But so was the wound. Every night, before sleep found her, she retraced the details like a broken prayer. The unsigned letters. The unfinished painting. The woman in the mirror who knew her face before she did. And always, the same question, pulsing at the back of her mind. What really happened to Elise Grayson? One quiet Sunday, while arranging mugs on the cafe shelf, a man left a note at the counter. He didn't order coffee. He didn't say a word. Just looked at her with a blank expression, and left. The note had no signature. Just a single sentence in sharp black ink. She didn't die. She just stopped being useful. Ava felt the air drain from her lungs. There was no doubt. It was him. Or someone still working for him. That night, she didn't sleep. The feeling of being watched returned, thick, paralyzing. Her skin itched under the weight of unseen eyes. She thought about calling the police, but what would she say? That a billionaire once tried to erase her identity, and now he might be following her? She knew the truth before she admitted it. The story wasn't over. It had just changed scenery. She started digging, not into the mansion, but into Elise. She spent nights in public libraries, chasing names through dust and silence. Most articles painted Elise as a beautiful enigma. Socialite. Wife. Disappeared without drama. There were no reports of violence. No death certificates. Just a vanishing act. But then she found it. A faded newspaper interview from just weeks before Elise went missing. In it, Elise spoke about opening a foundation for women who had lost their sense of self in toxic marriages. Sometimes, the greatest luxury isn't money. It's the right to be yourself without asking permission. Elise Grayson. Ava stared at the words for a long time. Elise had tried to leave, not just the man, but the version of herself he had invented. Things began to shift in Ava's apartment. Phone calls at 3 a.m., always silence on the line. Windows left open without explanation. Once, she came home to find her drawer slightly ajar, her favorite sweater missing. And then came the envelope. Slipped under her door. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. It was her, asleep in her bed. The picture had been taken from inside the apartment. She was no longer in the mansion. But the mansion was still inside her. And if she didn't act soon, she knew, she would be pulled back. Not by force. Not with chains. But with something far more dangerous. Memory repainted as destiny. Ava changed the locks the next morning. It didn't help. By then, the invasion wasn't about doors or windows. It was inside her, in her breath, her thoughts, her dreams. The mansion had followed her not in walls or whispers, but in the way she no longer trusted herself when she looked in the mirror. She barely recognized her own reflection anymore. She'd started wearing Elise's perfume again. Not on purpose. It was instinct. Familiarity. One morning, she opened her drawer, and there it was. A bottle that should not have followed her from that house. But it had. And she'd kept it. Just like she kept the letters. The memories. The ache. Just like he knew she would. It was raining when the second note arrived. Taped to the inside of the cafe's restroom mirror. She wasn't even surprised anymore. You're still playing her better than the others. He's proud. Her hands trembled as she tore it down. That night, she didn't go home. She sat in the back of a diner, eyes scanning every face, the storm outside matching the one inside her chest. She couldn't keep doing this. The running, the waiting, the watching. She needed to end it. Not escape it. She took a bus to Westchester 2 days later. She didn't call anyone. Didn't tell Thomas. Didn't alert the press or make a scene. She just wore a black hoodie, kept her head down, and let instinct guide her. When the mansion finally appeared beyond the fog and trees, it looked different. Smaller. Weaker. Or maybe she was the one who had changed. The gates were open. Not just unlocked. Wide open, as if waiting for her return. The gravel cracked beneath her feet, every step echoing louder than the last. But she wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She felt something else rising in her chest, something sharp. Anger. She crossed the threshold of the mansion. No one greeted her. No Thomas. No voices. Just the house, still and tense, like it was holding its breath. Like it knew something Ava didn't. She didn't stop to explore. She went straight to the West Wing. To the mirror room. It was darker than she remembered, and colder, as if grief itself had thickened in the walls. And there, in the center, was the painting. Finished. She walked closer. The woman in the portrait wore a wedding dress. Her hair was swept back. Her eyes. Ava's eyes. But the signature at the bottom wasn't Charles Grayson's. It was hers. Her name. Written in red. She stumbled back, heart pounding. And behind her, soft footsteps. Not heavy. Not rushed. Deliberate. A voice followed. "You came back," Charles said gently. Not surprised. Not angry. Just relieved. Like he'd known this was the only way the story could end. Ava didn't answer him. She couldn't. Her mouth was dry, her throat tight, her heart pounding loud enough to drown out every sound in the room. She stood there, caught between the painting and the man who had tried to turn her into a memory. And yet, he looked so calm, so certain. "You left too soon," Charles said softly, stepping forward, his voice echoing gently off the cold walls. It wasn't finished. You weren't finished. She turned to face him fully, fists clenched, not from fear, but from the unbearable pressure of truth pressing against the inside of her chest. The portrait behind her seemed to glow in the dim light, like a final draft come to life. "My name," she whispered. "You signed my name on that painting." He smiled, not cruelly, but with something worse, a kind of mournful affection. "Because you became her. In every way that mattered." "No," her voice cracked. "I became what you needed. And I forgot what I needed to survive." He tilted his head, as if studying a flower refusing to bloom. "You were never surviving, Ava. You were waiting to be seen." Tears burned at the corners of her eyes, not from weakness, but from the weight of everything he had twisted inside her. He wasn't just rebuilding Elise. He was breaking anyone who dared stand in her place. "You don't see people," she said, her voice trembling. "You sculpt them." He took another step. "What if that's love, Ava? Taking someone shattered, and shaping them into something unforgettable?" She stared at him, and for a moment, she understood everything. He wasn't a monster. He was a man who had lost control of his grief and made it sacred, who had turned loss into religion. And now, he worshipped at the altar of the woman he could never save, by trying to resurrect her through those he could still touch. She stepped back toward the painting. She looked at it one last time. And then, slowly, she reached up, grabbed a small letter opener from the desk nearby, and sliced the canvas straight down the middle. The sound tore through the room like a scream. Charles didn't move. Didn't speak. He just blinked. Like something inside him had finally broken too. "I'm not yours," Ava whispered. "And I never was." Then she turned and walked away. Outside, the air was colder, sharper, but her steps were steady. No one followed. No one called her back. And for the first time in months, she didn't wonder if someone was watching. Because now, she was watching herself. And that was enough. If you liked this story, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.